Greetings and welcome back. In this video, we're going to go through the setup of a simple mesh emitter. And I'll be honest with you, there's probably an elite few of you out there who will find this example somewhat familiar. So again, I'm in the content examples project. So if you're looking for some of the assets I'll be using, that's where they can be found. Over in the game folder, actually, before we do anything, let's go to our My Particle System folder. Let's add a new folder, which we will call Mesh. Then, once we've got that in place, we'll go to the game folder and we're going to search for cow. And we're going to find the SM toy cow static mesh. I want you to drag a copy of that into your mesh folder and say copy here. Now we can step into that folder. Oh, also, let's double click on it and open it up in the static mesh editor, which is visible here. Here's the material for it. Let's go ahead and click to find that in the content browser. And I would like you to drag a copy of that into your mesh folder as well and make a copy there. Okay. Now, let's rename some things. So we're going to have static mesh toy cow. Actually, we don't even really need our own copy of that. That's me being a little overzealous. Let's just right click and delete that. I don't need to be all that crazy about things. We can go ahead and force delete it, and that's fine. Now it's gone. All we really need is the material. And I'm going to right click on this material and rename it. We're going to call this cow mesh. Actually, let's do mat first. So mat underscore cow mesh particle. Long name, but it says what it is. Okay, so if we open up this material, hopefully you've seen this maybe once or twice. If you haven't, it's pretty straightforward. We're gonna make some changes though. The base color we're going to get rid of. It's gone forever. And we're gonna replace it with a particle color, like so. Then, just because it looks nice, we're going to take the spot color and we are going to multiply that by the particle color and use that instead of just the straightforward spot color. That way, the spot color becomes like a modulation value. So no matter what color our cows turn out to be, they could be purple. These spots are just going to be a darker shade of purple instead of just being gray, which would look a little drab. Okay, so with that done, let's apply and we'll save. So we have something that uses particle color, which will be cool for our setup. We can close that now. And let's right click and create a new particle system, which we will call mesh particles. And let's go ahead and close out our search line so we can see that. We will double click, and the very first thing I'm going to do is right click and add a type data module for mesh. Now these have a default mesh already set up, so they're going to start emitting these great big blocks, which is not what we want. So here inside the mesh data type data module, you'll see the mesh that we're going to use. So click on that and just search for cow, and you should find it pretty quick. So drop in SM toy cow, like so. And if we back up, these guys are already starting to come to life, but they're huge, right? So let's take our initial size and let's set that to 111 and 0.2, 0.2, 0.2. The catch here though is that they're going to be stretched and squashed in a lot of different ways. So to solve that, we're going to take locked axes and set that to X, Y, and Z. So now they're just scaled uniformly to a whole bunch of different sizes. We probably don't need that many cows either, but before we change how many we have, I'd like to change the initial location from which they're being spawned. So let's right click, we'll go to location, and let's use let's do a cylinder. That could work well. So let's see, initial location, yeah, let's just do a cylinder. Or a sphere. No, I'd rather do a sphere. There we go. So we're going to emit them from a sphere. If we select this sphere, at the bottom of its options, you'll see there's a 3D draw mode. You can click on it, you can see the actual sphere that we're talking about here. And we can just take its radius and kick it up And now you can see that we're spawning cows from inside that radius. Now again, it's a good idea to test this in the level, so we'll just bring this in. And we have a bunch of cows starting to float up into the sky, which I gotta admit makes me pretty happy. But they're all facing the same direction first off, so I feel like we should fix that. Well, let's fix the color problem before we fix where they're facing. So right now we have color over life, and that's great, but I don't really want to change the color of these cows over their lifespan, so we're just gonna delete that. Now, the other thing about this is that we want to use our custom material that we edited at the beginning of this video, and to do that, we need to go into Mesh Data module and make sure we check Override Material. Then we can use the required module, and that will, then we can plug in the actual material that we want to override it with, which is our matte cow mesh particle. Notice right now this was auto-populated with the material for the original toy cow mesh. So we're going to take our custom one for particles and drag that on there. So now our cows immediately turn red, and what that means is that they're not getting any color data whatsoever. That's kind of the same thing as 0 in this case for this material. So let's right click and we're going to add an initial color. So go down to color and choose initial color. And we'll drag this up toward the top. Again, I like all my initial stuff to be near the top. And we will set the distribution for the start color. Again, that's the type of number you want to use. We're going to set that to a uniform, which is going to have a min and a max value. We'll take the min and leave it at 0. We'll take the max and set that to 1 in all 3 axes. And now we have cows of a whole bunch of different random colors being born. And again, that makes me super happy. I don't know why, it just does. Okay, so right now the problem is that all of the cows are kind of facing the same direction. Let's solve that. If we right click, we can go down to rotation, and you'll see we now have access to some modules specifically for meshes. So there's initial mesh rotation. So let's click on that. And just by adding that in, and if we take a look at its settings, you'll notice that its distribution is 0 and 1. We could maybe take the min and set it to -1, -1, -1. Not that it's going to matter that much. Now we have a whole bunch of really random rotations for all of our cows, which is pretty great. Now, let's make the cows fall down to the ground. So I'm going to, again, try to make the most of my screen space here. I want you to be able to see Cascade, but there's a whole section of Cascade we're not going to be using too much, so it's nice to be able to see stuff in the level at the same time. So let's right click and we will add an acceleration. I'll just do a standard constant acceleration, and we'll set Z to -980, and they just start falling. I like how they get that little kind of upward pop at the beginning too. So we'll leave the initial velocity right where it is. Now I want these to collide as well. A quick disclaimer though, they're not going to collide based on the actual collision of the mesh. They're going to collide based on the location of the particle, which is going to be at the mesh's origin. So you have to know that going in. You do not do this type of effect if you want perfectly accurate collision. This is better for things like debris, or if you had like a level that was, the first thing that always comes to mind is a robot factory, and you want like a gigantic vat of robot parts being dumped out somewhere in the background, and you don't really care how accurately they collide, then a mesh emitter would be perfect for that sort of thing. But let's see, let's right click and we're going to add a collision module, like so. And now they're not falling through the floor anymore, but they are dying on impact. So let's take the collision settings and we'll take max collisions. Let's set that to 2 and 2, so it's 2 and boom. You see they're stopping and they're just kind of falling down through, so they're not doing much. To fix that, we need to take our damping factor and we'll kick that up to maybe 0.4 across the board. And then we'll take the min and set that to about 0.2. So they're going to get some bounce. But let's do more than that. Let's do maybe 0.7. And now we're running into a problem of lifetime, because these guys just aren't living in long enough to do anything. Now, the collisions are going to kill them eventually. On that second bounce, they're going to just die. So we could take the lifetime and set it up pretty high, like 5 seconds. And there we go. So now we have some cows falling from the sky and bouncing, which again might ring somewhat familiar to a certain very special group amongst you. So with that, you've seen how to set up a mesh emitter. The big takeaways here to keep in mind that once you add your mesh, you can override the material. There are also several different modules that you'll get access to that are specific to meshes. So notice, like for rotation, I have initial mesh rotation and I have initial rotation. I would want to use the mesh version for those. So that is going to wrap things up for this video. Thanks a lot.